Time to tackle some difficult topics. Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today it is Shudder Saturday, and I am taking a look at the 2008 movie Deadgirl. Now, I've seen this movie in a lot of top 10, top 20 most disturbing films of all time lists, and I had never really gotten around to seeing it. Now that I have watched it, what I will say is I don't know if it would make my top 10 or even my top 20 most disturbing films of all time kind of list. But that's only because I have seen a lot of disturbing movies. What I will say is if you have not watched Deadgirl and the upper limits of your disturbing movie experience or sensitivities go to Silence of the Lambs, then you should probably give this one another thought, because this goes into some pretty dark territories that you might not be very comfortable going into. This movie followed the characters of Ricky and JT, high school boys that are a bit of social misfits, outcasts, drunks and druggies that ultimately take one day to skip school. And while they're hanging out and they want to drink beers, where do they go? Well, let's finally pop over to this abandoned asylum that they affectionately call the Nut House. And that turns out to be an interesting little term for it, because when they go there and they get chased and find themselves in the basement tunnel catacombs of the abandoned hospital, they come across a rusted shut door that when they pry it open, inside they find a room with all sorts of stuff in it, including a chained up girl. And this girl is covered in plastic and by all accounts seeming to be alive and feral. And the former takes a pretty sharp turn there when they realize that she is not in fact alive, that she is dead and cannot fully die. She is just animated. They do use the word zombie in this film a few times just as kind of a reference point, but that's about it. I mean, this is not necessarily a world where zombies walk the earth and it is a familiar territory, but so this is brand new to them and very foreign and very weird, and they don't quite know how to take it until JT decides that he wants to take it into the realm of, well, we now have this beautiful, gorgeous, naked, mute woman that by all accounts isn't living in the first place. Let's have ourselves a sex slave. Now, I'm going to take a moment right now, and I actually probably should have done this a little bit earlier, but this is about as good of a time as I can think of to pause and just warn the viewership here that although I typically try not to incorporate any kind of swearing or anything along those lines into my videos, I'm going to try to adhere to that. But I will be discussing very adult, very difficult, very complex topics openly and freely, because I really think that there's really not a whole lot of ways to tiptoe around some verbiage here. So just be warned on that one. If you have minors in the room or so on and so forth, I will be using difficult adult words, not necessarily swearing, but I will be using them freely and openly because I really can't think of a different way to talk about this one. So be warned on that one. So, JT takes it upon himself to basically have a zombie rape victim that he has his way with many, many times. Ricky, on the other hand, isn't quite so sure about this. Ricky has more of a moral compass than JT and comes up from a background that isn't quite as abandoned, isn't quite as disenfranchised as JT. And he also has this crush / love interest with a girl that goes to his school. So there's a lot of moral questionable, a lot of conflict going on in Ricky, and not quite so much in JT, who is basically just out to stick it where he wants. And the movie gets into some pretty gross territory from there, including at one point they prove that she won't die by shooting her with a gun in the abdomen, and when those rot and become pus-filled pustules, they become, well, hey, that's a moist opening. Take that for what you will. So this definitely gets into some dark territory here. So this film has a very polarizing audience base to it. Either people seem to really love it or really hate it. And what I found with this film is that it could be dismissed with some level of justification as strictly just torture porn with nothing beyond shock value. It could also be lauded with some level of justification as an allegorical masterpiece of society's beleaguered infestation of toxic masculinity. Where I tended to land with this one was kind of in the middle. I took it more at face value, less as an allegory and more at face value, but even so, just taking the characters of Ricky and JT, I found it to be a very tragic piece of expectations of love versus sex, and what we feel is necessarily owed to us versus what we feel we can just take. And yeah, toxic masculinity is definitely prevalent in that. And the moral quandaries we have there, that, some of the turmoil that's going on within Ricky with this crush, especially that already has a boyfriend, is, well, I'm a good guy and I like you. And therefore there's this level of expectation, or this level of you owe me. And that definitely gets put under the microscope and definitely gets addressed and definitely gets blown up for the toxic line of thinking that it is, as noble as it might seem to somebody like Ricky in his own shoes. So it definitely puts a lot of really difficult things about love and sex and crushes and so on and so forth, objectification. It puts them all under the microscope and takes a really harsh, dark look at them and takes it to very logical and very tragic outcomes. Without getting into the spoilers there, there's a sense of almost poetry to the way that things wind up going throughout the course of this film. Really what I think it comes down to as far as the audience base of this movie is reception of art is in the individual's perception. And I really believe as long as it is viewed with open eyes and an unbiased mind, there's no wrong way to receive a piece of an art's message. And if you feel that it is simply torture porn and shock value after having watched it, I can't really necessarily disagree with you. I can definitely see how somebody would view it as that. And if you didn't see it with any level of depth beyond that, I'm not going to say you're necessarily wrong. There's really no right or wrong. It's just I took it as looking at the characters as face value, looking at the storyline at face value, and still appreciating it as a well-written piece of very dark art. To go through the scores really quickly here, I gave the plot an 18, an intent of 17. The intent, I really do think the intent of this one was to shock, to disturb, and also to make a bit of a mind splinter. And it did do that. It didn't disturb me quite as much as I think it would a lot of moviegoers, and that's just kind of come down to the type of movies that I've watched. But even so, I can definitely see it being shocking and disturbing. But it was a good mind splinter. It did have me thinking about this for a good long while after I watched it. The acting, I gave a 20 out of 25. Honestly, superb acting all around. Jenny Spain as Deadgirl was phenomenal, and that could not have been an easy role, especially considering the amount of time that it must have taken to shoot the scenes and the situations that she was in during those scenes. Shiloh Fernandez as Ricky did a great job as the teenager in turmoil, and Noah Sagan did a great job as JT, who didn't really change his moral compass, but we just wound up seeing layers underneath the surface for what was pretty much already there. And I think he really sold it well. I think, honestly, this was a ridiculous concept, both in face value and underneath. And they were tasked with selling it, all three of them. And I think that they did. And that is something to be, there's something to be said for that. The technical, I gave a 19 out of 25. All of the practical effects, the makeup, the merkin wrangling, the camera work, and all the editing was all just remarkably good, and I have no complaints about this one. I think everything about the technical was very adept with this. So that gives us a total score of 74 out of 100 points. I did enjoy this one, but it would be a big stretch to say I would recommend it. If it is material that you feel like you can handle, and you can get beyond the disturbing nature of it, because this will test some people's limits, then I would say it is worth a watch. And you may hate me if you take my recommendation and go forth with this one. Like I said, it's very polarizing. I can't guarantee you're going to like it. What I can say is that I did. And that should about do it. That's my review of 2008 Deadgirl. I really thank you for joining me here today. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.